Hey guys, Rich with Rich Rebuilds here, and I'm back with my electric Mini Cooper build. We took a quick break from the Mini Cooper last week to talk about my new diesel truck. And if you aren't into diesel trucks, that's okay, but you should watch the video so you know just how everything around you that you can see and touch gets delivered, along with all the lithium-ion batteries ever made, all mined by diesel trucks and other diesel-powered machines. The goal for that build is to have it run in the quarter mile faster than my BMW i8. Ideally, I want all my daily drivers to run in the 12s or better in the quarter, so for that project, I'll need bigger injectors, bigger turbos, and a whole lot of other stuff, so I'm excited to show you all that build. But wait a second, I know what you're thinking. How does this guy have all this stuff? How much money does he make from YouTube to have a used high-end car dealership worth of cars? Well, the answer is not that much. Looking at my pay stubs from YouTube, I bet you I make less than most of you, but I have a really good side hustle I've never told anyone about. Now, 4 times a week, I walk down a long corridor, check in, get myself a small cup, and go into a private room, select from an assortment of videos, and do about 32 seconds worth of work. Now, it ain't much, but it's honest work. And if you aren't getting what I'm trying to say, yes, I am a donor. I donate my eggplant seeds to the seed bank. The average healthy male can make up to $1,500 a month for deposits, but I am far healthier than the average male, so I earn much more than that. If you do the math, you'll see with all the deposits I've made, it only took me a few months to buy my truck. This is how I'm able to afford my cars. Now, the most special part about all this is the wonderful amount of children I bring to this green earth. You may have seen them yourself. Heck, if your kid doesn't look like you, it could be mine too. Or when they grow up, I will educate them on how to build their own car or bicycle. And if I can't fulfill my duties to all my children, I'll give them the gift of Audible so they could obtain an education from the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. I like them to nurture their growing minds with podcasts, guided wellness programs, and theatrical performances. I currently have the small ones reading YouTube Secrets, How to Grow Your Following, Home Game, a book on accidental fatherhood, and lastly, Daddy Tried, Overcoming Fatherhood Failures. Maybe they can learn to be a YouTuber, or maybe they can learn about their awesome dad. Visit audible.com/richrebuilds or text richrebuilds to 500. That's 500. Thank you, Audible, for sponsoring this episode. So, quick recap. In the first episode, I bought the Mini Cooper for $1,500 off a guy at the internet and stripped out the engine and transmission at my shop, the Electrified Garage, where we service and repair electric vehicles. And yes, it's possible to own a shop that services EVs and own gas-powered cars because I like both. Crazy, right? Liking both? Imagine that. Imagine having the freedom to enjoy whatever you want. If you want to check us out, we have a Cars and Coffee starting December 5th and then the first Saturday of each month at our Florida or Cali location. Check us out. And for any EV repair and service stuff, just give us a call. Now, the second episode is setting the total budget of $5,000 and sourcing the parts needed to make the car move. I had Leenda clean the shift knob in the car. It turns out she did a terrible job and went riding off into the sunset on a scooter. So if you see her, please let me know so she can come back and collect her last paycheck. And the episode after that, I went to my friend Lee's shop so he could make the connector from the motor to the transmission. Steven and I then troubleshooted some motor issues, and I finally got the front wheel spinning with a 12-volt car battery. Now today we're going to look into some of the additional parts needed to really start piecing this conversion together. So far, we have the motor mounted and the controller that manages the power from the batteries, all mounted to the 6-speed manual transmission. A lot of people seem extremely confused as to an EV with a manual transmission. In the last Mini Cooper episode, I covered that, but I removed the clutch from the Mini, and I'm just going to do clutchless shifting. Remember, you can still select the gear without the clutch. And honestly, you won't really need to shift because with an electric motor, you can just pick one gear and stay there. If you want to do some more efficient highway driving, you can also pick a higher gear and just cruise. Now, we need to do some more shopping today to get some more parts. I need to figure out the braking system. What I mean by that is the power brakes. Now, in cars with engines, the engine creates vacuum to assist in the braking pressure, which is this right here. This is the line that goes to the engine for vacuum assisted brakes. Because without vacuum assisted brakes, you'd have to step on the brake pedal a lot harder to stop the car. Since we can't create vacuum on our own, let's go with an electric vacuum assist pump. I'm going to go to my favorite site, DIYelectriccar.com, and this is one of the best places I've seen to get EV parts for cheap. The overwhelming majority of EV conversions are never started, and after they're started, they're usually never finished. So it's a good idea to head to the classified section to see what's for sale. Now, there's lots of sadness in this section. Sadly, lots of really cool cars are going for next to nothing because people don't typically want someone else's project. An RX-8 for 14 grand, powered by Tesla batteries, Really cool car. No one wants it. Another guy with the Volkswagen Beetle Electric, he wanted $25,000 for it, tried to sell it for years, went down to 13, and eventually got it down to 5 grand. So I did a little shopping and I was able to get a ton of parts I needed for next to nothing, which I'll talk about in a second. But if you can't find a decent electric car on here, or you simply don't want the risk of an electric car that has no warranty whatsoever, a couple of my friends over at the Climate Exchange are running their Tesla giveaway raffle yet again. They're an awesome nonprofit that provides research, education, and tools for a cleaner tomorrow. So take that, EV people that think I don't care. If you win, they not only let you build your own Tesla, but they also pay the taxes. So thank you, Lucky Stars, for that. Check out the link below, and it's limited to 4,000 tickets, which means you could win an EV instead of trying to build one like I'm doing here. Let's get to work. And this was only $20 off the website. Now, this device right here should create enough vacuum to simulate the vacuum created in an internal combustion engine. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure this thing actually works in the first place. There's 2 terminals, positive and negative. It says that you shouldn't run the pump without it being connected to a low, but I'm just going to test it really quick. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. This also comes with a pressure sensor and a check valve, so the air pressure only goes in one direction. But for 20 bucks, this is actually a really good score. We're going to hook this up and move on to the next components. From now on, going forward, we're going to make sure we have everything tested, because that's going to lead to some problems. Granted, this thing was cheap anyways, but it doesn't really matter. So because I'm here by myself, I got to use my foot for this. This is extra ghetto. Hold on. See, these are one of the disadvantages to being by yourself doing this. You got to do ghetto stuff like that. There you go. Yeah, that works. All right, so now that I've taken this front cover off, you can see I took the front plastic shield that was here. I put this harness back because I could actually use this for other accessories. And I put some of the rubber back too, so it will form somewhat of a seal for the hood. Does it really matter? Not really. So right here is the OEM vacuum line that forms the vacuum for the brakes. So we're just gonna pull this off. And there we go. And I just broke that. That was not a good idea to break that. But this is gonna come out. And because I'm only a single person holding this, I really can't film that coming out. But I'm gonna pull that out and I'm gonna run the new line here to get that going. Finally got it out. All right, so the hose is in, the pressure sensor is there, as well as the check valve. But before I mount this vacuum assist motor, what I have to do is I have to get the actual traction motor in a better place. Right now, it's just kind of dangling off of the transmission mount on that side. And what I have to do is I have to mount the rest of this to the car, because right now the axles aren't lined up properly. In the previous video where I had the wheels spinning, things were kind of at a really weird V angle. I just wanted to confirm that the transmission did work once it's in the car. Again, you have to keep testing things 5 and 6 times. But what I have here is I have an actual plate that was made out of scrap metal. That goes right here. That's going to be the secondary motor mount. And even more importantly are these screws right here. I got these from Home Depot. These are the AODs, and the nuts that I got are ABCs. What I want to do for that is I got the right thread pitch. That's in here. And what I want to do is this. I want to screw this in, see how far it goes. Right there, coming out. That's coming out on that end. That's made a pretty decent penetration. Penetration is a funny word. And I want to have at least maybe a couple threads on the outside. I think I want to go about this far. I'll cut it about right there. And after I slice it, that's what I'm going to put the nuts on top of that to secure this in place. Okay, now this is secured in place, I'm going to put a secondary nut on top of these two. But these two up here are to start forming the bracket then I'm gonna put the rest of the electronics on. But what I have to do now, because this is pretty loose, I'm gonna pull this motor out, get it over this point right here, and then these two holes that correspond here, and I'm gonna actually have a bolt that goes through these to form the secondary motor mount. All right, and this is a testament as to how much of a budget build this really is. So basically what Steven and I are doing, we're taking all the leftover cans of paint that I have in my garage and we're mixing them all together and we're creating like this beautiful concoction of just kind of everything going together really nicely here. So I'm really proud of that. Again, it's on a budget. So if I want to go out and buy paint, that's going to bring us over budget. So we're just using all the leftover scrap that we have. And also, congratulations on the yes vote on number 1. We won the landslide victory. We won by, I think it was what, 75% to 25%, something like that. So we absolutely crushed it. So thank you to all that voted. And this is for the right to repair your own vehicles. Now manufacturers have to give us the tools that are necessary to diagnose and troubleshoot cars now. So thank you again, Mass residents. And I'm gonna let Steven continue to get high off this paint. Steven kindly came over and he actually painted the entire engine bay a nice black and degreased everything even further, and it's really nice and uniform now. So shout out to Steven for that. He's the one holding the camera. Give yourself a pat in the back, Steven. Nice.
Yeah.
So basically, we're gonna make this look really clean. If it was up to me, I would just throw wires everywhere, but Steven keeps me in check. So now what we're gonna do is he kind of made a tray, and we're gonna put the Zilla controller and the hairball interface on this tray. But what I want to talk to you guys about is there's two things that I have to install. One is that same vacuum pump we talked about, and I have the wiring over here. I have the pressure sensor and I have the one-way valve. So I'll be mounting that underneath this tray that we're putting the controllers under. So another thing that he did, he relocated the power steering pump reservoir. So it used to be up here on this bracket, but he moved it down a little bit lower. Again, to keep things more clean. I think what the plan is, we're actually gonna cut a small hole right here so you can still access that. But there's two things I have to install before we go any further, and one is the contactor, and the second thing is a shunt. And these things were dirt cheap. I probably won't use this one because this one's broken, obviously, but these things, they're pretty much free. And then this is a DC contactor. Now, what these things do is the DC contactor is more of a switch. And what that does is, here are the two poles right here. And when you want to actually have current flow across these two terminals, you apply 12 volts to it. It closes the switch that's in here, and then it allows current to pass through. Now, the thing with this is I didn't have a contactor for my electric motorcycle build. So what I had to do every time in order to disconnect the power, I have a 72-volt battery pack, and I used to actually have to click the two terminals together. And I'll tell you one thing that's not very fun, it's clicking terminals to a 72-volt battery pack together, because it sparks every time I thought something was wrong. So having a contactor, a DC contactor, it allows you to simulate connecting those two connections together without physically touching anything. So you apply 12 volts to this, it closes the contacts, and again, it allows current to go through. Teslas have these. Teslas, they have two of them. And I have a video from a while back, me changing the contactors in the car for 400 volts. So when the contactors are activated, it allows the high voltage to flow through the system. And this is the DC shunt. All a DC shunt does, it actually measures the amperage across 2 points. A lot of the times, people would actually take, high voltage, run it through the cabin, and have an amp meter in the car to tell you how many amps are going across these two terminals. And that's not good, because you literally have high voltage going through the car. What this does is, this is a shunt. It probably goes about maybe like right here, so very near where the high voltage comes in, and it takes a very small sampling across the 2 points, and it actually calculates how many amps are going through that. So what you would do is you'd have these two small tiny wires with next to no voltage going through it, going to a dash display to tell you how many amps you're pulling. And this is most similar to, I guess you could reference it to an oil pressure sensor in a gas-powered car. An oil pressure sensor back in the day, it was a round gauge and would have a sampling of the oil from the oil pan, and you'd have hot oil going through the cabin going to the gauge. And we don't want that, because in case, you know, it's the fan and there was some kind of breakage in the line, you'd have hot oil in your car. The newer oil pressure sensors, they have a sending unit. So the sending unit goes in the car, and then there's 2 wires coming from the sending unit, and those 2 wires going to the gauge will read how much oil pressure there is. So that's, if I could compare them to, and that's probably the closest comparison I could give, a shunt versus an oil pressure gauge, and how they work and how they keep you safe against bringing hot liquids or high voltage in your car. But yeah, so now I got to think about how we're going to run the high voltage from wiring from the front of the car to the back. I'm probably going to use the same cavity that this exhaust was here before. So I'm going to have high voltage wirings right here from the shunt, and that's going to run all the way down to the back of the car. I haven't decided what batteries I'm going to put in there yet, but hopefully we'll figure that out pretty soon. What are we doing now, Steven? Show me that.
We got a piece of ABS left over from the CyberQuad build.
Thank you, CyberQuad.
Thank you, CyberQuad, for all the things that you've done for us. And we'll have this mounted onto our aluminum angle irons as well. We've got the Zilla controller. We'll put up about here.
Look at that.
And we've got the Zilla interface. And then I'll probably make another little box over here so the fuses can be upright and fancy and neat like that.
Okay. And
we'll tie it all in accordingly. Other than that, I mean, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
Not too many other things that we need to add.
Not really. This is simplicity and the beauty of having an EV, honestly.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
No, it should be good.
We'll still have to figure out where we're gonna put the.
Now that we're making progress in the front of the car, the next thing we have to do is to get some conduit for the high voltage battery lines. And now they're going to be right underneath the car where the exhaust was, so I want to make sure they're weatherproof. Now the ones I'm looking at now aren't rated for weather, and I would have realized this if I had my glasses on, but I found the longer waterproof ones that are higher up, but unfortunately I'm too short to get access to those, and I'm not really sure what my goal was here by doing this over and over again. All right, let's head home. All right, so I finally got that conduit that was way too damn high at Home Depot, but the goal is for this is to have the positive run through here, negative run through here, and the data going back and forth from the battery pack to the front where the motor controllers are. So that's gonna go back there. I really don't wanna have the data going through the car, only because it's a lot cleaner and easier this way. I don't have to run things underneath the carpet. I could just slide it underneath the car, and it'd be a lot easier to have these 3 things close and strand together. Now, what I want to talk about next is I have a couple of fuses here that I got over some time that no one really wanted these. These fuses they go for pretty much next to nothing. When they're brand new, they probably go for like 30 or 40 bucks, but used, they're just not really worth much at all. So these are pretty much free. Same thing goes with the contactor. Now, what I want to do is I want to figure out what fuse I'm going to use. And this is a 400 amp rated up to 650 volts. This is 400 amps up to 400 volts. And I don't think I need this big of a fuse. That's kind of overkill. So I'm going to put this one on the back burner for another project, maybe the Humvee, if I ever start that. I'm not really sure. So I want to go with this one. So this is obviously positive here. I want to come from the back of the car where the battery's going to come from. There's going to be a wire. Let's pretend it's this one right here, going all the way from the back of the car. It's going to go to this fuse, and you want to have the fuse as close to the contactor as humanly possible. This is just similar to what it's going to look like. This is the actual setup because it's going to be run nicely in this conduit, and this conduit is rated for moisture and for various temperature fluctuations. So this is a good conduit to use. Some may disagree, but I don't really care. These are really good pieces of wire that I got from someone. They just didn't want them anymore. Pre-cut wire usually goes for next to nothing because, again, no one really needs like a 6-inch wire for anything. So I got these for, I think it was maybe 20 bucks for the whole thing. This was 20 bucks, and then also it came with a really large strand of the red and the black. This is worth literally a fortune. A lot of this isn't even used. It's just they cut it and they didn't really have any use for the various lengths, but these things are definitely going to come in handy. So this is a very, very, very good pickup. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start routing the wiring going from all the way to the back of the car, and I'm going to have it come up here. I'm going to have a shunt, I'm going to have the contactor, and I'm going to have the fuse, I think all on this tray right here on a really nice display. So I'm going to start working on that. All right, now that the shunt is mounted, I have to work on this vacuum brake booster. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a bracket out of some old angle iron I have laying around. All right, so the contactor setup's almost done. As you can see, I drilled one hell of a fancy looking hole here. The next thing I want to do is get the controller on. And this is the fun part, because now I get to utilize my super cheap cables that I got that were pre-cut. And the cool thing is that this is one of those cheap cables. And once I plug this in here, this is actually a perfect distance. I could move this out a little bit and have this plugged into the bottom there. And if you look on the controller, all of the terminals are already labeled. So that's a motor negative, the battery, and that's the motor positive. And on the bottom, that's the battery positive right there. So those are the 4 connections that have to go from the controller to the motor. This is the motor plus and minus. I connect these two. After that, I connect the main contactor to the battery plus, and the other one goes from the shunt all the way to the other side to the battery minus. So, but this definitely needs a box to be made around this. It might be a clear plastic box, so it's, you know, kind of cool to see, but I'm just gonna temporarily put things in place, because remember, I still have to do lots of wiring from this going into the cabin. So I have to figure out where I'm gonna drill that hole to through the firewall. So I have to get the shunt connectors all set. That goes into the firewall for instrumentation. I have to get the connections from the contactor that control the opening and closing of it. And I have to get the connections from the Zilla controller. So I have the hairball interface on the Zilla controller that go back into the cabin. And that controls various things like, you know, TAC inputs, key, various sensors, start inputs, the main chassis ground, things like that still have to be wired into the car. So there's still a lot to be done. Okay, so lastly, what I have to do is I have to get my heat shrink tubing ready, my butt connectors ready to start wiring up this hairball controller. This wiring harness is actually the old engine wiring harness that I'm not going to need anymore, so I cut this out of the car. So I want to cut down on some pricing, so instead of actually going to Home Depot and buying wiring, I'll just use existing wiring. I'm not going to need it in the car. Again, this is the hairball interface. This is a mini flathead screwdriver that I'm going to need to back off these terminals. And one of the more important things is the accelerator pedal. This accelerator pedal is actually from a Tesla Model S, a 2013 model, and I can actually use this with the Zilla interface. What I'll be doing is I'll be taking some of this wiring, stripping it back, and wiring it directly into here. And I'll show you guys how to do that in the next episode. But either way, I'm running low on funds, so I have to head over to the bank to make another deposit. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more updates on the electric Mini Cooper build. Check me out on Instagram at RichieBKid, and I will see you guys next week. And also, if you see Leenda anywhere, she went MIA, let me know. She was wearing a set of white shorts and a bluish greenish shirt, and she's riding a scooter with approximately 30% battery life left. Let me know if you've seen her anywhere, because she needs to come pick up her last paycheck. See you guys.